the R.M.Williams Outback podcast, bringing to life the characters that feature in Outback magazine and more.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Terry Cowley, Senior Associate Editor at Outback magazine. Recently I was reviewing a children's book for issue 168 of Outback, and I came across an event that happened in 1988 called the Great Australian Camel Race. Perhaps if you're of a certain age, you'll remember it. It was big news at the time. The book is about a young woman named Jill Colwell and her camel Tiki and the incredible adventures and misadventures they had walking and riding all the way from Uluru to the Gold Coast. A quick internet search showed Jill was now a GP working in Ipswich, so I just had to reach out. I hope you enjoy this talk with Dr. Jill Colwell, who has the most vivid and precise memories of her great adventure with Tiki the Camel. 1988 was a year of many, many events in Australia, even if today we view the bicentennial celebrations through a bit of a different lens than at the time. One of those events, possibly one of the most harebrained when it was first thought of, was the Great Australian Camel Race, held between April 23 and July 16. Split into 6 stages from Uluru to Alice Springs, Boulia, Longreach, Charleville, Warwick and finally the Gold Coast. It covered more than 3,300 kilometres, making it the longest animal endurance race ever attempted. 69 riders started and 41 physically made it across the finishing line, though only 28 officially placed. One of those, in fact the 6th place getter, was Jill Colwell. Back then Jill was a 33-year-old former jockey who thought riding a camel wouldn't be that different to getting on a horse, just higher. Today, Jill is a medical doctor in Queensland who has just co-written a children's book about the race, bringing it to life for a whole new audience. Jill, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hello, Terry, and thank you very much for inviting me.
First up, congratulations on the publication of the book Tiki and Jill and the Great Australian Camel Race. It's now 38 years since the race. What prompted you to want to write the book?
Well, it really wasn't on my to-do list to write a book because I've got a bit busy life, but I was approached by the publishers, Allen and Unwin, to help them write a book because they like to write some children's books about significant events in Australia. And I always thought that the camel race was quite a remarkable feat by so many people, not particularly myself, but the other people that did it, and how well the camels did it against all odds. They had to travel across different terrain and their feet had to adapt really quickly from the sand of the desert to the rocks of the Barkly Tableland to the mud country of the Channel country when it rained. You know, they did what probably no other animal could do. And so when the publishers asked me to help do a book, I thought, well, you know, it really deserves to have its place in Australian history. So with a lot of help from them, Kate Simpson, of course, who's an experienced children's author, and the artist Craig Smith, we put together a book.
As I said, the book is a children's book. You co-wrote it, as you just said, with children's author Kate Simpson, and it's been warmly illustrated by Craig Smith. The text is quite sparse and basic, so children of all ages can enjoy it, but it is complemented by articles, documents and photographs that remind readers that this amazing race really took place.
Yes, and I'm really happy that the other competitors have been listed and named in the race. As I said, I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. It was a really big team effort. When you're worn out and tired and you know, not feeling well, the only way you get up each day and keep trudging east was because everyone else was doing it. They made it fun. There were so many characters in that race. There were a lot of laughs, a lot of good times amongst all the hard work. It was a lot of fun.
I bet.
It was a challenge that Arthur Earl, who conceived the race, he really wanted to challenge what were then modern day Australians to see if they could do tough things the way that people did a century before.
It has to be said, and of course the title of the book makes this clear, Tiki the Camel is pretty much the central character. Could you tell me about how you first heard about the race and how that ultimately led to you meeting Tiki?
Well, I was living on the Gold Coast working as a doctor. There was a lot of publicity on the Gold Coast, and I just kept reading about it in the papers and hearing it on the radio, and I tried to dismiss it because I thought there's no way I could possibly do that, and I wasn't sure that any animal could do it. 3,300 kilometres, in specific time frames and having to meet checkpoints and vet checks and all that. So I kept trying to dismiss it from my mind, but it wouldn't go away. So I ended up going and seeing Arthur Earl and saying, I want to give this a try. And so then I had to try and find a camel, of course, because I lived in a small house on the Gold Coast and no place for a camel. So Arthur put me in touch with some other people on the Gold Coast that had also been sort of captured by the idea of this adventure, and we got together and got some wild camels to try and train, which was a whole new learning experience.
I bet. What was Tiki like?
Well, Tiki, he was quite a unique character. He was a very tall young camel, lightly framed, which turned out to be a blessing for an endurance event. But his personality was that he was basically very lazy, which is not good when you've got to do 3,300 kilometres. And he was, in the grand scheme of things, he was what we call a follower. He didn't like being in front. He liked to just follow everyone else. So that meant that really he preferred to be last, and sometimes that put me in peril of missing checkpoints because he was going so slow that we were running out of time, and if you didn't get to the checkpoint on time, you were eliminated. So we had a few close shaves in the early few weeks of the race. He'd had some basic training. When I got him, I leased him for the race. The people that had got him out of the desert for the race decided that for various reasons they didn't want to do the race on Tiki. So I leased him, not knowing that he would be not a really easy camel. And he was not very interested in working with me. The first few times I approached him, he just started spitting on me, regurgitating his cud and spitting all over me.
Lovely.
Yes, the most horrible green, foul-smelling stuff all over you, and it just gets into your pores. And then he would strike at me. Camels their front legs can strike in all directions. If I got too close to him, he'd sort of basically knee me somewhere. And one day he actually got me in the forehead, and I got a huge laceration across my forehead. So the initial few weeks were not very good and not very promising. And I was once again reconsidering whether I really should do this.
You got some advice from camelier Steve Madden at one point about not reacting to what Tiki was doing.
Yes, and that was a really good clue. He said, get a really big garbage bag and put it over my head, just have some little slits for the eyes, and just walk up to him, and when he started spitting, don't react, just keep doing what you're going to do, which was to catch him or whatever. And that worked really well. He spat on me a few times, and I just kept doing what I was doing around him while he was spitting. And I could see his brain thinking, this is not working. So he just basically, after a few days of me wearing a garbage bag, he just stopped spitting on me.
And hopefully he stopped hoofing you in the face as well.
Yes, that's right. He did too. He decided I was basically all right. I think, he was sort of testing my boundaries and his boundaries, and he decided that I wasn't doing anything that upset him and that he would cooperate. So it was like any relationship, I suppose. You've got to work each other out.
I suppose so. What had been your previous experience with camels?
I'd had no experience with camels. I thought they'd be really easy, that they're just a bigger version of a horse. I'd just sit on the camel for 3 months and see Australia. And I love the outback. I'd been to the Northern Territory on a bus trip, and I really, really loved it. And I thought, well, being on a camel, we'll go places that no vehicle can go. We'll go through the top of the Simpson Desert. All that sounded wonderful, just sitting on the camel and enjoying the day.
Yeah, easy.
Yes, easy.
So what kind of preparation did you do before the race to sort of make that riding a bit easier?
Well, I actually did quite a bit of preparation. I changed my work hours. So I worked at a night 24-hour medical clinic. I worked all night, and then during the day I would go out and train the camels. The people from the Gold Coast that wanted to do the race, we had a few camels out on acreage, and I would go and get the camels and ride them for a few hours. And I'd do running myself. I'd go running to try and get myself fit. And that was really good because, as it turned out, Tiki was not very interested in carrying me at all for the first few weeks. So I had to actually walk beside him or jog beside him so that we could get to the checkpoints. So I arrived reasonably fit, but I still was doubting whether I'd actually get all the way. But I just thought, well, maybe I can at least do that really, what I thought would be the best part from Uluru, Ayers Rock to Boulia. I thought maybe we'd be able to get through there, and that turned out to be really hard. But we made it.
To quote the book about the start of the race, when the big day came, they were ready, sort of. Can you describe that day?
Yes, 69 camels all milling around, Sir Joe Bioki-Peterson with the starter's pistol and Ayers Rock in the background. It was, incredibly exciting. I kind of felt a little bit intimidated, I think, by the people around me. There were people from camel farms that were very experienced, Aboriginal stockmen who'd spent a lot of time with camels. Albie Mangles, the Australian adventurer, the SAS regiment, 6 of them from Perth, and they were big, strong, fit-looking men. And I was this 50-kilogram Gold Coast doctor, and a few of them looked at me and asked me what I did, and I could see they were dismissive and thinking, well, she won't last long. That I thought, well, I'm only here to enjoy it and have fun and do the best I can. And when Joe fired the starter's gun, some of the competitors actually galloped off, and I thought, well, they're not going to last very long. You can't gallop all the way to the Gold Coast.
No.
And I'd been a marathon runner. I was Australian marathon champion in 1982-83 for the 42K road run.
Wow.
And I knew you've got to go very slowly at the start. It's got to make it easy. So Tiki and I just went along very slowly. And he was very happy with that, to be up the back with watching everyone's backsides. So the race strung out very quickly. Some people, they just trotted and cantered the camels to the first checkpoint, and those camels got too tired, and the vet said, well, you have to be retired from the race. You can't push the camels like this.
Fair enough. I guess there was prize money for winning, and that, I guess, makes some people do rash things.
Yes, that's right. They didn't basically understand the principles of endurance. You've got to preserve that energy, not get injured, not get overuse injuries.
For yourself and the camel.
I was with an American who came over. There were a few international people who came over, and of course they had to hire camels like I did. And Alan Deaver, who came from California, I was with him early on in the race, and his camel kept bucking him off. Tiki had been bucking me off quite regularly initially, or trying to buck me off. And I managed to stay on. So once again, he realised that didn't work, so he stopped bucking. I could push him down, sit him on the ground, get on, and he'd get up sometimes if he felt like it. And when he did get up, he didn't buck. But Alan Deaver, his camel, every time he'd ask him to get up, the camel would come up bucking and buck Alan off. So Alan was bruised and sore, and he became too scared, basically, to get on the camel.
I don't blame him.
No, he was really knocked around. He had a back brace on and bandages around his knee.
Oh, dear.
And he said, I'm not going to ride this camel anymore, Jellies. I thought to myself, well, it's a long way, and once we get out in the Simpson Desert and the sand dunes, it'll be difficult for him. We made camp together, Alan and myself and a few other people, I think, on the first night after doing about 50 Ks. And the next morning when I got up to go and get Tiki ready, Alan was calling out to me from his sleeping bag, and he said he couldn't move.
Oh, dear.
We didn't have a doctor in the team in the whole race. I was the only doctor. And rigor mortis basically set in with him. He was so stiff from walking all day the previous day that he just couldn't move.
Oh, my goodness.
And he was like an old man, he's a 30-year-old bloke.
Yeah.
Could hardly walk. And I said to him, well, Alan, you know what this means? You're going to have to ride that camel because you're not going to be able to walk today. So, yes, Alan showed some fortitude and he got on the camel, and fortunately the camel eventually stopped bucking him off.
Wow. Did he make it to the end?
Yes, he did. He was last.
Good on him.
And very proud of it. He told me he came over to win the race, but he quickly changed his goals to just finishing.
Smart.
And he was very proud of running last. If anyone looked like falling behind him, he would stop and take photos, and not just one photo, but 20, so that he could be officially last.
Fair enough. So one day without warning, Tiki bolted away from you. That must have been a pretty worrying experience.
Yes. When you do something like this, in your mind, you have contingency plans and you think about what if that. And it was really something I never expected in the circumstances. We were in the top part of the Simpson Desert and there are huge sand dunes, and we'd fallen right behind because Tiki just kept sitting down and he wouldn't get up, and there was nothing wrong with him. He was just feeling lazy, I think, and a bit bewildered, and the other camels got way out in front of him. He couldn't see them anymore, so he just fell way back. And I had a backup crew I was sharing with several other riders, and they only had one vehicle, and they said to me, well, you're going so slow, you probably won't get to the checkpoint, so we're going to have to concentrate on the other two blokes in the team that were way ahead of me. And I said, well, fair enough. And they left me food and water and said they'd see me at the next checkpoint in a couple of days. So Tiki and I were out in the desert by ourselves, no sign of any civilization. Everyone else was way ahead. I got off him and I was leading him, and then suddenly he just pulled away and ran away, and was totally unexpected. And he just ran up and over the first sand dune, and I was calling out to him, of course, trying to get him to stop. But he ran to the top of the first one, looked around, then ran again to the next one, and I was running after him. And he was getting further and further in front of me, and he had everything that I needed on him, the water, the food, the swag, and my rifle. We were told we had to carry rifles in the desert in case wild camels came in and menaced the domesticated gelded camels. So it went through my mind that this was the finish, and I know I was going to come looking for me for another probably day and a half if I didn't turn up at the checkpoint. And so I had the choice, do I stay where I am without any water or anything, or do I try and retrieve my camel? I'll be right off track. He was running south and the race had gone east. And every time he'd get to the top of a sand dune, he'd just look around, as camels do. They sort of scan the horizon 360 degrees. And I knew he's probably looking for other camels because he'd been a wild camel in the desert, and he probably thought his family might be out there. So he'd run from one big sand dune to the other, and he was just a little dot on the horizon eventually. But every time he got to the top of a sand dune and scanned the 360 degrees, I would run around on my sand dune and wave at him so that he could see some movement. And I thought, maybe this will work. Maybe he'll realise that there is nothing out there and he'll come back. And suddenly, I noticed he looked around and around, and then he turned around 180 degrees and looked at me running around a little dot on the sand dune. And to my great relief, he started to walk back north towards me. And it took him, probably half an hour, but he eventually turned up right beside me and looked at me as if to say, well, let's go.
Bloody annoying animals, but they're smart too, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. He worked out that I wasn't that bad after all, and I was better than nothing, I suppose.
Well, yeah. If there's no one else, I'll just stick with you then.
Yes, and I was so tired. It was getting dark then, and so I thought, well, I'm too tired to go on, and I'll have a quick sleep, and I'll get up in the morning and see if we can get to the checkpoint, see if we can get back on the race route. I had no mobile phone, of course, or any radio to contact anyone to tell them that I was going to be a bit delayed. So I lay down, I loaded the rifle because I thought if wild camels do come in and attack Tiki, I'll be up and firing as quick as a flash. But I lay down on the swag and I had nothing to tie Tiki to. I just said, well, you stay here, don't run away again, mate. And the next thing I knew, it was just beautiful. Like if you've ever been out in the desert, there's no noise, there's just the occasional bird, there's no light pollution. So there are so many stars. It's just amazing how many stars there really are in the galaxy. It was just beautiful. It was one of the nicest nights I've ever had. You know, I've gone from thinking, well, I might perish out in the desert to here I am with my camel and we're just doing what I wanted to do, and that was to see part of Australia that very few people experience. And I was doing it all by myself. I fell off to sleep. I thought I'd be awake in a few hours and we'd get up and try and catch up with someone. But I didn't wake up till about 9 the next morning. The sun was way up in the sky, and I thought, oh, I hope Tiki's still here. But he was. He was still sitting there chewing his cud looking at me.
It seems you came to a bit of a truce, and from then on you were able to make better progress.
Yes, that's right. And he was getting fitter, and he decided that, you know, whatever it was I was trying to do, he was going to cooperate. We got to catch up with the tail enders and keep going.
As the weeks passed, the desert sands gave way to Queensland's Channel country, and then the rains came with thick black mud. That must have been pretty challenging.
Oh, yes. That Channel country around was Glen Ormiston Station, just on the Queensland Northern Territory border. It's really deep black soil, and when it rains, it gets very, very slippery and then very, very sticky. And like I was really worried that Tiki would pull a muscle because his legs would just slide, you know, instead of just walking straight forward, his legs would be sliding out to the side. And I thought, any moment now he's going to tear a chest muscle. I was trying to walk beside him, and I had so much mud on the shoes that like a kilo of mud on each shoe. It was really difficult. You know, take me 10 minutes to walk 100 metres sometimes, and then you'd come to a creek that was full of water and you'd have to try and get across that as well. Every vehicle was bogged, even the big army trucks they didn't go through the Simpson Desert, but they'd arranged to meet us at Glen Ormiston. They all got bogged. Every single vehicle was bogged. It wasn't supposed to rain in May in the Channel country, but it did, and it nearly stopped the race. You know, the race could have been abandoned because of the risks to people. Some people got lost. They tried to get around creeks and ended up way off track, and there was no way anyone could go and look for them because any vehicles were bogged.
Eventually the landscape changed, everything became greener, and you crossed the Great Dividing Range and could finally see the Pacific Ocean. What was that moment like?
Oh, that was just incredible. It was surreal, really, because, you know, I kept thinking back to when we were out in the desert by ourselves, and we're thinking we've got a long, long way to go. And we went through Canungra and then up that, which was the eastern side of the Great Dividing Range. And I remember I walked up this hill, and in the distance to the east you could see the ocean sparkling, the Pacific Ocean. And it was just an amazing, surreal feeling to think that one animal had gone all that way, passed all the vet checks. I'd survived nearly getting lost in the desert. I'd had a broken rib by that time. I'd got severely dehydrated in the Northern Territory when I got Shigella dysentery and terribly, terribly sick. But once I got to the Gold Coast, it was just amazing to think that we were going to finish in sixth position in a race that I was only doing as a bit of a tour and an adventure.
How did you get dysentery?
Just about everyone in the race got dysentery. After we left Alice Springs, people started to get really bad diarrhoea, vomiting, severe muscle pain. And it turns out that Shigella was fairly endemic at the time in Alice Springs, and flies were so bad that it was just carrying it from person to person. And we had no basic washing facilities for 3 weeks from Alice Springs to Boulia. I didn't have a shower for 3 weeks, probably too much information, but there was no water to shower in. So you can imagine how easily an infection that's very, very infectious would pass between people, and you didn't even have to be close to them. The flies were that bad that you couldn't really eat without them all going in your mouth. And so I had a fly veil. Fortunately, I'd thought of that, and I had a fly veil, and you had to put your plate or your cup inside the fly veil to get food in without the flies joining you.
Oh, gosh.
So Shigella dysentery just went through everyone, and it became basically a public health crisis because we had, at that stage, probably 50 riders left in the race. Most of them were infected. They were still having to get to checkpoints when they had dehydrated from the diarrhoea. The leader, Gordon O'Connell, he came from Emerald and had trained very hard for the race. He got Shigella dysentery probably worse than anyone. And his kidneys stopped working for 3 days.
Gosh.
But he wouldn't stop because he knew if he didn't get to the checkpoints, his dream of winning the race would be finished. His kidneys were in failure, basically, and he kept going through to Boulia.
My goodness.
And the Royal Flying Doctor came in and flew him to Mount Isa for treatment. And fortunately, by some miraculous event, his kidneys recovered with a whole lot of intravenous fluids. And by the time the race was ready to restart, Gordon was right to race again.
That's dedication.
Yes, it was. It was amazing. Toughest man I've ever met, and really deserved to win the race. And he's still going strong. I saw him about 12 months ago, and he's still looking fit and well. When I got the Shigella dysentery, I'd got out, it hit me just after we left the sand dunes, and nothing stopped it. I brought some anti-diarrhea medications, and we also tried charcoal from the campfires, and I just felt so terrible. The headache was just unbearable. That's from being dehydrated. And I said to Tiki, there's no way I can keep walking. I said, you're going to have to carry me now. And he did, God bless him. He must have realised how sick I was, and he just kept walking east, and we spent about 3 days with me not being able to keep anything down. I think I probably lost about a stone. My trousers wouldn't stay up. I had to get some baling twine and tie it up around my waist. And here I'm thinking in moments of sanity, I thought, and I was doing this for a bit of fun, a leisurely ride across Australia. Here I am.
This is not fun.
I feel like I'm dying. And I finally got to the checkpoint, and I had my eyes closed. I was just hanging onto the saddle with Tiki, and we got to the checkpoint, and I got off, and I looked around, and I was just boiling hot from the fever. And I found a little shrub. There were no big trees. There was just a little shrub at a place called Cockatoo Bore, where flies were terrible. The wind was blowing, there's dust everywhere. Everyone around me that had finished the race, they were just lying down and looking terrible. And I just lay under this tree for hours, could hardly move, tried to drink water. And eventually by night time, when it cooled down, I started to feel a bit better and I started to recover.
So it just basically had to run its course?
Yes, yeah. Once I got to Boulia, Queensland Health arrived because it was deemed a bit of a public health crisis that all these people were infected and might carry the dysentery all through Queensland as we headed towards the coast. So they made everyone take antibiotics to basically try and get rid of the bacteria from the whole community, and that seemed to work quite well. We all sort of recovered and carried on. A few people got too sick and they didn't return to the race.
Gee, as if it wasn't hard enough.
No, that's right.
What was it like crossing the finishing line and the aftermath of that?
As I said, a surreal experience, yeah, and I felt proud of myself for doing it, and very proud of Tiki. How well he did it. He passed all the vet checks, and they were quite strict. The vet was very, very strict making sure that all the camels were well enough to keep going. And Tiki, given that he was unfit when he started and quite a young camel, I was really proud of him. I'd lived on the Gold Coast, so I went back to my home on the Gold Coast and got into my bed for the first time I slept in a bed for 3 months. And I felt really claustrophobic. I was on the verge of getting up, getting my swag and going and lying out on the lawn. The roof seemed to be too close to my head and I couldn't see any stars. That was quite strange, but I thought, no, you're back to civilization now. You're going to stay in this bed and you're going to get used to it again.
The final 28 placings are printed at the end of your story in the book. It's hard to tell just based on people's names, but I believe you were the first placed woman and only one of a few women who did place.
Yes, that's right. 4 women finished. There were 7 of us that started. And I mean, I didn't look on myself as a female. I was a rider with a camel like everyone else. It did, I think, make a few blokes that had dismissed me think, well, maybe women are a little bit stronger than we think, because they knew what I'd gone through, that I'd been really sick, that I'd had a broken rib. That happened when I had to pull Tiki out of the way of a road train. The road trains were a bit of a menace as we got closer to the coast, and I broke my rib, and that was really painful to ride. I could hardly lift the big saddle onto Tiki. Like those big saddles we use were about 25 kilos. And when you've got a broken rib, you're lucky to take a breath, let alone carry something. Yeah, that really tested my resolve. And Arthur Earl was there and someone said to him, oh, do you know that Jill's broken a rib and she probably won't be able to finish? And Arthur said to them, well, she's from Walgett. I think she'll be fine. Everyone from Walgett's tough. I grew up on a sheep property near Walgett in northwest New South Wales.
After the race, you had to return Tiki to his owner. Was that a sad thing to do?
Yes, it was, but it was the only thing I could really do. I'd leased him for that brief period of time, and the owners wanted him back for other things now that he'd been properly trained. They had acreage to run him on, and I only had a backyard, obviously, in Southport on the Gold Coast.
Were you at that stage where it was literally hugs and tears, or?
Yes, it was, yeah. Special camel.
Did you think he sort of had some understanding of what was going on?
I think so, yeah. They've got really good memories, camels, and they're a lot smarter than people give them credit for. Once I handed him back to the owners, I deliberately didn't go and see him because I wanted him to make the break and attach to them. But I thought about him a lot.
Yeah, I bet. You're still thinking about him, obviously.
Yes. And it's quite touching that there's been a book based about him.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have been proud to know that.
Media star.
Been the subject of the book. Yes, that's right.
Do you know what happened to him? Would he still be alive?
No, he's not, no. Camels don't live much longer than 25 years.
Okay, fair enough. The backdrop to this was that the race raised money for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, which was appropriate since their services were needed. And it also served as a tribute to the role camels and cameleers played in Central Australia, particularly in the 19th century. Did you previously know much about that history?
I did. I was always interested in Australian history, so I knew that how important they were for, building the telegraph line, carrying those poles up in the centre of Australia and bringing gold ore out of the centre of Australia. So I knew a little bit about that, but as I said at the beginning, I wasn't sure that what we were asking the animals to do would be feasible, and I would have been very quick to pull Tiki out of the race if I thought he was struggling physically. They have these big flat feet that are just basically callus pads, and those feet adapt to the terrain that they're in. So when they're resident in the sandy country, like the deserts, their feet pads are quite soft, but if they are in the stony, rocky country like the Barkly Tablelands, those feet callus up and get harder because of the terrain. So we were asking them to adapt their feet in the matter of weeks, sometimes days. And then once we got closer to the east coast of Australia, there was a lot of rain and that made those pads soft. I was worried that Tiki's feet would get cut with glass on the sides of the road because, unfortunately, as everyone knows, people chuck their bottles out of cars and there's broken glass everywhere. So that was pretty stressful, trying to avoid all the broken glass. And, one step on a broken glass and he would have cut his pads and I would have had to pull him out of the race. So we're very lucky. Sometimes I think back on my life and I think, how lucky am I? Things, when I really need them to happen, they seem to happen, that I seem to get lucky.
Some people would say you make your own luck, Jill.
And well, I suppose our thoughts shape our life. If we think about things in a positive frame and think we can do it, then we probably can. I've witnessed it in the camel race, people pulling together, helping each other with when you ran out of food or ran out of water and were having problems with your camel or your camel gear, people would help each other, and we were just all ordinary people, and working together, we achieved something which I think was quite extraordinary.
Since that time back in 1988, have you had anything further to do with camels?
No.
It was enough, was it?
I thought, no, I definitely prefer horses as a hobby. I wouldn't have expected a horse to do what Tiki did, but horses were my first love growing up on the property at Walgett, and they still are. I still have horses on my farm here near Ipswich.
Well, that's a nice little segue into something that we very briefly mentioned at the beginning. I said when you took part in the Great Australian Camel Race, you had been a jockey. There's a little bit of a story there, Jill, which I'd like you to expand on, because you still do the occasional race.
Yes. It's like a disease, you can't really really ever stop it once you love racing. I've got Arabian horses and I race them at the picnic races in Torbanlea, for instance, which is up just north of the Sunshine Coast. I like the rules that we have in Arabian racing. We don't use spurs, we don't use whips. The Arabians are very genuine animals that usually give you 100% without you having to force them, and I just love it once a year. I'll start getting myself fit to ride in the jockey pad and getting the fastest horse out of the paddock, and we go to the races. And we've had a lot of luck and a lot of fun.
You mentioned that you've got a bit of history with Birdsville.
Yes, I was the first female jockey to ever ride at Birdsville, 1983. Back in the 70s when I first started, there weren't many women that rode in races, and we were considered not strong enough to ride in races. It really wasn't until the anti-discrimination laws came in the 70s that women really were able to pursue being a jockey as a career.
And you did do that for a while?
Yes, I won a few races, but I don't think I was a very good jockey. I enjoyed it, but I didn't want to continue it because for various reasons about horse racing at the time. And as I said, the Arabian racing I do now, I enjoy. They do what they will. And it's just amazing what my Arabian mares will do when they decide they're human. They'll do whatever you ask, which is quite humbling, really. Quite a responsibility.
Obviously, you had a medical career to pursue, which might be just a little bit more lucrative than being a jockey.
Yes, that's right. A little bit safer. When you're a jockey, the ambulance follows you around. When you're the doctor, you're usually in the ambulance helping.
Very smart, very smart. As you go about your day-to-day business as a GP these days, as you are many people aware of the amazing thing you did back in 1988?
No. And it's not something I tend to talk about. I'm rather a forward-looking person. So it was quite a surprise, really, when the publishers, Alan and Unwin, approached me to help write the book.
That might be out of the bag now, Jill.
It is out of the bag, yes. When I go to horse events, we sometimes chat about the camel race, but I'm sure I'm going to have to talk about it a bit more now. And as you can hear, I can talk a bit.
Well, you're going to have patients coming in asking for an autograph, I suspect.
Yes, that's right. I'm really happy with the book. Kate Simpson was great, and Craig's done a wonderful job with, capturing the true colours of the outback.
As I said at the outset, Jill's book that has just been released is called Tiki and Jill and the Great Australian Camel Race. And as Jill just said again, it is published by Allen and Unwin. We have reviewed the book in issue 168 of Outback Magazine. And Jill, needless to say, it's a very positive review.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for talking to me, Jill, and all the best for future adventures.
Thank you, Terry. Much appreciated. And yes, everyone, just get out there and follow your dreams.
Hopefully those dreams might be a little bit easier to achieve than the Great Australian Camel Race.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Thanks again, Jill. Great having you on the podcast. How good was Dr. Jill? We had a lot of laughs in this interview. How fantastic that this piece of Australian history is being brought alive once more. It really does speak of a different time. Tiki and Jill and the Great Australian Camel Race is reviewed in issue 168 of Outback Magazine. The book is published by Allen and Unwin and is suitable for children of all ages. Thanks for listening to the podcast. To know more about R.M.Williams Outback Magazine, go to outbackmag.com.au. We'd love it if you'd subscribe so you never miss an issue. This podcast is produced by me, Terry Cowley. Editor-in-Chief is Mark Muller. Marketing and design by Claire Das Nevis. Original theme music by Isaac May.